So as the spat continues between Farage and Rupert Lowe, and as far as I can see, this is probably going to go the distance. I think this is going to get very, very litigious. And then I think in court, we could see a whole range of information come out about this. We might get a full inside working and breakdown of just what is going on inside Reform UK. Is Yusuf actually doing anything to quote professionalize Reform UK to make it a more party political organization, or as he is, as many people have said before, he is doing nothing and is just there as an illusion to make it look like he's doing something. Bear in mind, he's been in his position now for what? 6 months, I think, at this point, maybe a bit longer. What's he actually done? I can't see anything. I can't see him making any speeches or saying they've done this or they plan to do this, or yeah. I think there's a ton of stuff that is going to come out about this, about reform, if it does go litigious. I think it absolutely will. I can guarantee it. And not only that, but there's also a chance. What if Ben Habib decides to join in this on as well? Because remember, he was the last one. He was the last one that had should we say, a public spat with Farage. Now it's Rupert Lowe. Is it going to be with Lee Anderson next? Is he going to have a falling out with Richard Trice? But we know, of course, Trice owns shares in Reform UK. So maybe that's what he uses to, keep them, nice and sweet between each other. Yeah, we could have a bit of a public fight, but remember, I own all those shares, Nigel. Calm down. Who knows? But one of the things that I've often said, the best way to really defeat reform is get them to talk about things other than immigration. Because when it comes to those non-immigration subjects, they're very out of step with the rest of the British public. They are massively, massively out of step with the British public on a range of issues. Most notably, the NHS. Remember, Farage has been caught on camera in the past saying that it is time to move to a private insurance model. Does Farage still believe that? And do his fellow Reform MPs think that? And if his fellow Reform MPs think that, what then about, I don't know, the quote membership of Reform UK? Do they believe that? I don't think they do. So dragging them to talk about these other positions, getting them off immigration, they can't keep on this same tune. It's immigration, it's immigration, it's immigration. Eventually, people are just going to go, well, hold on. Is it really immigration that's the problem? And I've said many times, if they do actually ever get into power, they are going to fail. They're going to fail hard. Because first of all, it is very obvious Farage has no party leadership skills. So there is going to be a lot of clashing. And at the moment, if he's falling out this hard with Rupert Lowe, what's it going to be like when he's got to try and keep, I don't know, 100 plus other Reform MPs in check? And we already know that the MP vetting isn't the best. We're going to have a very quick look at some of their other policies. And just to show you, they are massively, massively out of step with public opinion on a lot of this stuff. A lot of other stuff, they are massively out of step on public opinion. Starting, of course, with Ukraine. Like, they are massively out of step. The British public is massively in favor of supporting Ukraine. Always remember, at that last general election, Farage went, "Yeah, it's NATO and the EU's fault that this war started," parroting, of course, a Russian propaganda line. Showing that Farage in the past has been very, very pro Putin. Stuff that right now I would be throwing in his face. I would be making sure that all those public statements he has made, recorded, shown, are just constantly going out on social media. This is the guy you want us to to defend you from Putin. Exhibit A, you know, um, well, Exhibit A through to all the way to Z of all these things you said about Putin. How can he defend you? Absolutely going them on that. Absolutely going to them on that. That is 100% sure on that as well. But it gets even better. It gets even better. Because one of the big things, of course, that Reform UK want to get rid of is all this, quote, climate change. To quote Richard Trice, he refers to it as absolute garbage. And to get rid of all this, scrap all this net zero stuff. They've constantly talked about this, how all this is just a massive con, that it's destroying British industry. But how is it destroying British industry when all this green crap, to use the term, has been the only growth industry? It's gone up 10%. They can't explain that. But when you look at people's voting intentions, all this stuff, all this stuff is incredibly important to people. Even Reform's own voters. More in Common did a poll on this about energy and climate, what you think. And 77% of people at the local elections, that is their number one point, how they're going to vote. 70% of people favorable of all these net zero targets, how they're going to vote in the next local election. And here's the real kicker: over 50% of Reform voters agree. They agree with all that net zero stuff. So there is a massive disconnect between half its potential voter base and what Farage's MPs are saying about how they want to scrap all the net zero stuff. Very, very out of touch. Very out of touch indeed. But if you want to really see how out of touch they are, wait till it comes to what, as we said at the beginning, Farage's past comments, of course, about the NHS. Right? This is the real kicker. 83% of British people say that the NHS should always be primarily be funded by taxation. So if we ever do get a reform government, or they want to govern, then the NHS is not in safe hands under a reform government, or even in Nigel's hands. The British public overwhelmingly back nationalisation of the health service. It is just not. It is not something up for discussion. Anything like that. But no, reform have said in the past that he is open to anything when it comes to replace Britain's NHS. That is massively out of step. What would a what would a reform government do to the NHS? That is a valid question, but they are massively out of step on that. And then, of course, Brexit. We are seeing right now. Oh, that was just Alexa there. But yeah, we are seeing right now, even the British public, because of Trump, because of all this stuff going on, increasingly even more favorable to closer and ever closer ties with the EU. The recent poll, 55% of British people say it was wrong for the UK to leave the EU. Wrong to leave the EU, 55%. And only 30% said it was right. What would, foreign policy of Reform UK be with towards Europe? I don't believe there would be one. I believe it would be a even more harder policy of what we saw under Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, to the fact that you can just ignore Europe. You don't even have to speak to Europe. You can just ignore them. That's not how you should conduct foreign policy. The stuff we've been saying, and I've been praising Starmer and Lammy for doing since they came into the job, has been the right and correct thing to do. And we've seen that pay off dividends just in the past 2 weeks over some of the stuff on Ukraine. So those are just, I would say, some of the big issues that are forming around Reform UK. And that when it, should we say, eventually does put out a manifesto, a lot of its policies are going to be very out of step with what the British public want. And if they are just ever talking about this anti-migrant rhetoric, which is only going to become more extreme, as you've seen from Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe's idea to solve immigration is that we put them all on some island in Scotland, as if that is somehow going to be the silver bullet that solves immigration. Yeah, I always come back to this. Look what happened to the right-wing populist party in Poland. They were in power close to almost a decade. The party almost no longer exists. It can't even get the money together to go and defend itself in court. Look at Italy. Italy has had a succession of ever more right-wing populist governments, because when one has gotten in, they have failed, and then another right-wing punk comes up and says, we're going to be the real saviors of Italy. We'll tell you how to do it. And then, of course, when they get into power, they realize, actually, we can't do all that stuff. And then they inevitably fail. And then another one pops up, says the same thing, gets in. Oops, we can't do all that stuff that we promised. And that's how you get to Georgia Maloney, who ultimately, the exact same thing is going to happen to her as well. So, and then eventually the Italian people will probably realize that actually voting in all these, right-wing lunatics probably isn't the best idea. But as always, let me know what you think down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.